Now, the Supreme Court has gone ahead and ordered the central government that it needs to come up with a cogent oxygen deliverable plan. This in wake of a lot of back forth and a slugfest that has ensued between the state governments and the central government with regards to the logistics of oxygen, the life-saving gas that has been in extreme paucity in Delhi, in Maharashtra, Karnataka, and several other states at this point of time that are under lockdown, that are facing an immediate crisis to save the lives of hundreds and thousands of people. Joining me on the broadcast is a very special guest. We're joined by Dr. Mohsin Wali. He's a Padma Shri, and he's going to tell us in this broadcast about what he is going to desire from the central government to ensure so that oxygen supply levels are available at all times in every single district, local level as well as state level. So Dr. Mohsin Wali, it's great to have you on the show. And my first question to you is going to be, you already know what the crisis Delhi has gone through with regards to the oxygen level supplies. If you were the central government or you were given the reins of the center for a day, what are the changes that you would be making to ensure that oxygen supply is steady and uniform to every single part of the country and there are no lapses?
Yes, this is a very legitimate question. There are two or three things. I've always given an example of Akshaya Tritiya, on which 13 or 20 or 25,000 weddings take place only in Delhi. And obviously these couples would produce children in the days to come after 9 months or 1 year, usually. And there will be a growth of 20 to 25,000 children every year. So have we made the schools for them? Have we made hospitals for them? Have we made facilities for them? This is a big question in my mind since yesterday. And the answer came that we have not felt the need in the past. And if the hospitals have not experienced need in the past, it's very difficult to plan for them today suddenly when the spurt of oxygen demand has come and they barely have the storage facilities. You see, like we buy milk every day, we buy grocery every day, we buy eggs every day, bread every day. Like that, there was a regular refilling of the oxygens in all the centers, all the places where oxygen is used for the patients, like in the hospital. And such a problem, such a crisis was never experienced. It was never brought up to the knowledge, but the planning was done. The planning was done, and the very sadly, I'm saying that planning was not implemented. It was done on paper, implemented on paper only, so that when the crisis situation came, we were all hands up. Not only hands up, innocent children have to die, the patients have to die, the doctors have to stand on their nerves, stand up for working in a very adverse circumstances. So like repeatedly, even today Supreme Court has said that we are not happy with the attitude of the center that Delhi's demand is not met. It's above somewhere 700 tons. So what it means to say is very, very important that you work out a demand. This is the demand which they have projected at the peak consumption time. It may not be same tomorrow. It may not be same, God willing, we have less cases and we don't have so many cases in third wave, which we are preparing for. So today is the day I should be prepared to meet the demand of the third wave. Do you see, people are talking about the third wave. It looks to be very absurd. We are not able to fight second wave. Planning for the third wave, no. Whatever you are planning for the second wave, keep that steady. Like you remember, we made coaches during the last wave, very expensive coaches for medical rehabilitation of the patients. Beds were arranged in the coaches. We made mega hospitals, like in Bombay, you converted that into a vaccination center. We made 3 big hospitals. Of course, they were temporary, but in Delhi, it was a big facility. Yes. What? Who ordered, I don't know, to wind up these facilities? And suddenly when the cases dropped, they were winded up and the equipment was not accounted for, it was not kept maintained, it was not kept safe. And I could see some centers refurbishing the same equipment, and I was shouting, call the engineers so that all the equipment should be ready within a day. So this was the attitude. Now, what I say when you are asking for the oxygen is also same. What we are preparing for the second wave, we should homogeneously maintain that and try to reduce. You know, we have already felt the peak demand. We have already felt the peak demand. So there is hardly any increase over and above that. God willing, cases should not improve. So all these demands which were projected by the states, they should not depend on the population. They should depend upon the number of hospitals and their consumption. Now, another thing is happening. Everybody is buying cylinders. Everybody who is calling me, I can see the cylinder bedside. So these cylinders are in acute shortage. So the small bottles, what we call them cylinders, and the medium size and the industrial size, these are the three components of the transportable oxygen. And now we are getting so many oxygen plants. We are getting so many bigger plants to generate. DRDO is establishing about 500 plants all over India in the next couple of weeks. So this all combined, I have a big question in my mind. I share with you, where will this oxygen come from? All this oxygen will be extracted from the air. So tomorrow a common man may not shout that my oxygen is going to your machines. So there may come a time we never used to walk down with these bottles. No, it's a theoretical presumption. We never used to walk down in our childhood with these kind of bottles in hand. So maybe tomorrow we would walk down with a cylinder at the back for our survival. So this situation is not
already commenced, doctor, where you're having oxygen vans and oxygen buses and oxygen cars, which is at a nascent stage. And I'm assuming that by the end of this pandemic, this would be more of a common occurrence than an anomaly. And that would be the sad set of affairs to actually witness. But that's something, that's the reality of life that we'll have to start living with. My second question to you over here, we're talking about oxygen and we're talking about logistics. You said we were caught unawares. The setup that we had done with regards to the ICU beds, the oxygen beds had been reduced from, if it were 100, it was reduced to 1/4. And that caught us off guard, and that should not have been done. Similarly, if you take a look at the oxygen plan, now, is it a good idea at this point of time to have every single, at least 1,000 bed capacity hospital or a 5,000 bed capacity hospital, they must have an indigenous oxygen plant mandatorily installed within their premises? That should be the order that should be sent out from the Union Health Ministry side as well. Because if you're serving about 1,000 people in your hospital, well, it only makes sense that you have as many oxygen tankers, or at least a plant that will be giving you unhindered supply of oxygen.
Exactly. You know, the consumption of oxygen has increased because we have a new modality of treatment called high flow oxygen cannulas. These high flow oxygen cannulas consume very high flow of oxygen, and therefore suddenly there is a excess demand. Also, oxygen driven ventilators, they put a lot of burden. Like we have a wedding, so we put extra lights, and that extra lights draw a lot of electricity. And if this is happening in every house, imagine the consumption and imagine the load. So we are having a system which is grossly overloaded. And it would be very good idea, as you have said, that hospitals should have their independent oxygen plants and they should not depend on outside supply. But you see, this is a wrongly presented situation. That a couple of weeks before, the chairman of SAIL, Steel Authority of India Limited, that's lady Mrs. Ganguly, she was saying we have tons of oxygen and you can just draw from the SAIL oxygen. Now, where is the problem? We are not short of oxygen as the world have projected. No, India is not short of oxygen. I would like to correct everyone. India has surplus oxygen. What we were probably short of the transport trucks, transport barrels, the goods train which can carry oxygen, and the distribution of the oxygen in one corner of India. From there, we have to send this oxygen. So instead of shouting for oxygen, people were needing the ways and means of transport of oxygen. That should have been done. Now, we have to make extra trucks. We have to make the other kind of trucks. We can convert these milk vans into oxygen vans. You see, they have the best material used. They have material used in the milk van. So what you tell?
Logistics,
but
to be sorted out. Maybe it's the armed forces. If they are they are at the helm of affairs, they are given charge, they will be able to better manage the logistical part of it, as has been proved in the past as well. Another question pertaining to this now the likes of Delhi and Maharashtra have witnessed and learned from their mistakes the hard way. There have been hundreds and thousands of deaths that have taken place because of paucity of oxygen cylinders, oxygen concentrators. What is the advice that you would like to give to the state of Karnataka that is currently witnessing the surge? Kerala also, which is under lockdown at this point of time, Telangana, Tamil Nadu, we talk about Uttar Pradesh, Punjab, they are all going to be witnessing the surge very, very soon in the next coming 2 weeks. We have gone ahead and tapered down when it comes to our numbers, and maybe in the couple of 2 weeks or something, we'll reach Maharashtra levels, and then we will sort of peak off. But what about the other states? How do we ensure that there's oxygen supply uniformly and at all times in these states? Have these states learned any lessons?
Yeah, we have to. You remember, I'll start from Dharavi. Dharavi was a cluster and the biggest cluster of the patients throughout the world. And we learned many lessons from Dharavi. This time, Dharavi did not get involved much. So you are talking about the South. Condition of South is very important. Like I give you an example. You talked about Bengaluru, Karnataka. There is a lot of movement between Visakhapatnam and Bengaluru, Karnataka. There is a mixture of people, a lot of transport, daily people going, coming back. There's a huge chance of spread of corona, and that has already happened in a big way. And the Karnataka is now probably the largest super spreader, or I pray God it should not be in the days to come. So all these states, mobility if you restrict, I say repeatedly, lockdown on your feet and lockdown on your face. This is the true lockdown. If you don't move for next 2 weeks, if you cover your face with mask, if you don't do functions, no weddings, no parties, we can only contain this way coronavirus. Otherwise, there is a mutant which has very recently come in the Visakhapatnam. It has already moved towards Bengaluru, and this would change further. And we have to be very alert about the coronavirus mutations, and they can be very harmful. So all these states should have their independent capacity. I am forgetting one very important point. Children. Children's hospitals, children's ICUs, children's beds. We have to talk it now, because in the third wave, children will be very much affected in the larger number. And today, as we are seeing, children are not going to ICUs, but maybe in the next mutation or next to next mutation, we need similar kind of facility for the smaller, younger children for whom we don't have vaccine. This is the different issue. For 18 plus and 45 plus, we have vaccines. But for children, we don't have vaccine. So we have to be very, very careful. They are the citizens of tomorrow. They are the future of India. We don't lose them. We don't lose them like this. We don't want to lose them like this.
We cannot take any sort of...
Yeah, because pediatric hospitals, we don't have much pediatric hospitals. We don't have much neonatal ICUs, children ICUs, children intensive care beds, children oxygen beds. So my request is to all the states through your channel is that we forewarned about this requirement, for which third wave will be greatly responsible. So we have to stand alert today. If we don't stand alert today, tomorrow we have no time then, like oxygen thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Mohsin Wali, for joining us on the broadcast and sharing your thoughts and your recommendations as to the oxygen.
Thank you, your channel, for inviting me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right. At this point of time, I'm also being joined by Dr. Vishal Rao. He is the Dean Academics of the HCG Cancer Center and member of the Expert Committee on COVID Task Force, GOK. Dr. Vishal Rao, my question is going to remain the same for you as well. The Supreme Court has gone ahead and ordered the center to provide it a comprehensive oxygen plan that is going to be of some remarkability for the entire country. Every single state that the center is going ahead and providing oxygen in an ad hoc fashion at this point of time needs to be made uniform. And the Supreme Court has gone ahead and pulled up the center to make an action task force to ensure that. You as a doctor who has witnessed situations firsthand, you have witnessed deaths happening firsthand because of paucity of oxygen in the capital. How do you go ahead and ensure that a action plan is put in place, and a foolproof one at that, to ensure that every single state and district is provided with oxygen in wake of the surge that is going to happen in the coming days and weeks and months in several other parts of the country, and so that nobody dies only because of the paucity of oxygen? You'll have to unmute yourself, Dr. Rao.
Sorry. So broadly, if you see, there are two scenarios before us. One is cities wherein they get supply of oxygen which comes to them, the hospitals. And the other is districts where hospitals go with their cylinders to the oxygen supplies to refill them. So there are broadly two scenarios. Now, the first one, that is cities, are still better off because oxygen comes to them. The districts are worse several times because they have to run every time to the cylinder, and that's a little more uncomfortable and more pressure on the hospitals and the smaller clinics.
Yes.
These are the two broader scenarios. Now, how do we bridge this gap? There are three important areas that we need to address. Number one is production. Number two, like the previous speaker said, is transportation. And the third important is reducing leakage. All the three needs to be done. Now, I personally today was inspecting one or two hospitals where we are trying to look at how do we ramp up the number of ICU beds. And we were looking at, let's say, for example, how do we set up 150 ICU bed? And what we were doing on ground is first looking at oxygen supply. The beds are available. We have the infrastructure. We are struggling with manpower and oxygen. So these four things are coming in various combinations for us. So now in this particular juncture, let's look at a practical scenario that in an average hospital that was not doing COVID, the daily requirement, if it was X, then currently the requirement is either 2 into X or 3 into X, at least, because ventilators are running full time. Now at this juncture, naturally, like if you see the requirement of Karnataka daily is 1400 to 1500 metric ton. At this juncture, we are getting about 800. So naturally, this seems to be commensurate with the expectation of what we are having with every hospital saying we need double the amount of oxygen, because every patient who's coming to the hospital needs oxygen.
Right.
He's not coming in just for the sake of an admission. Now at this juncture, one, we had proposed that, I think that's what Government of India has taken up very strongly, that all production of industrial oxygen has to be stopped and routed to medical oxygen.
Yeah.
Second thing, a lot of these transport vehicles are sitting at the docks of the oxygen plants waiting for 7 hours, 8 hours. We need to logistically look at how do we plan and support them better so that the time wasted at these docks are reduced. Third point in the same lines, that is, I'm talking, one is increasing manufacturing, the second point is logistical. Now there, we need a lot more of industrial cryogenic transporters that are going to be required to be used. And that needs to be coordinated in a cohesive way. You may need a minister exclusively to sit on this and only do this. It cannot be overlapped over multiple portfolios, because this is a complex one right now asking for this. Then third, after that comes increasing allocation per state. Now, how do you increase allocation per state? You will have to look at requirement per state and do a little bit of also extrapolation on what the current pandemic wave is looking like in their stage. Is it at the beginning? Is it at the end? Is it at the middle? What's the population like? And do some calculation and allocate it. Now, naturally, it's not linear. It's completely like an inferno at certain places, at certain states. So how do we tackle those like an emergency? And lastly, at the level of a grassroots level of a hospital, how do I reduce the leakages? How do I ensure stringent protocols of usages that needs to be monitored very, very critically? For example, saying no to high flow nasal oxygen, which takes out a lot of oxygen. Encouraging leakages, looking at, I think the technical teams, like in our hospital, the biomedical team is super active at this juncture. We are telling them to go to every place from the source of the oxygen to the pipelines to looking at the end source to check where is the leak happening, how do we ensure that the central lines are working very optimally well. There are technical expertise coming and telling us how do we divide the line so that we are avoiding leakages, so that one source is not going to 150 beds, but we are trying to create separate pipelines. So there is a lot more of technicalities involved which require engineers to come in and guide us.
Okay.
And we are calling them in.
Okay. Pertaining to the same set of guidelines that you have right now, envisaged for the center to go ahead and formulate. There was another discussion with regards to the requirement of oxygen by patients vis-a-vis the hoarding that is taking place at this point of time. There's fear psychosis. Every single patient who has the virus is thinking the worst, assuming the worst, and wanting to go for the oxygen or the remdesivir vials. Is there a way that a logistic could be formulated or a digital app could be formulated where you segregate a patient that can be operated, that can be taken care of, medicated from home, versus a patient that perhaps requires hospitalization but does not require oxygen or an ICU bed, versus those who now require an ICU bed or oxygen bed, and then go about, ensuring that their medication is followed up. So is there a way to segregate this and also remove that fear psychosis? This will all obviously bring about a reduction in the oxygen levels that are required, because we witnessed here in Delhi, we witnessed in Maharashtra, we're witnessing it now in Karnataka, that there's black marketing, hoarding that is taking place. People who don't even require it are keeping it in their homes just in case there's an emergency. Now, how do we try to contain all these loopholes?
So I think here the importance of evidence-based medicine is very, very pivotal. So, for example, with the case of remdesivir, the WHO has come out very strongly to say that the Solidarity trial, which was done on 7,000 patients, did not show an impact in any stage of the disease for any of the parameters that they evaluated, whether it was death or hospital stay or ventilator dependence. Now, considering this evidence of such a large data and a respectable body like WHO telling us that let us not use remdesivir because it does not help, I think we need to look at this aspect more critically in terms of understanding that yes, there is a restricted use of it, and the government needs to stringently, I think, communicate this across all boards to say that let's look at understanding that there is a very, very restricted use in a select set of patients which the physician can decide. And in those group of patients wherein within 2 to 10 days of the onset, where oxygen requirement is there in moderate to severe, not in the critical ill, this can be attempted because it kind of improves the clearing of the viral load, and further to that also adds to a little shorter length of stay, which can be a couple of days. But that needs to be communicated, and rather than creating panic among patients and telling them go and procure it. So, but on the other side, there is unfortunately a sense of futility among doctors. I think as physicians, as intensivists, there is a sense of futility because they all want to try to save a life. And it gets into a frustrating level at the grassroots level because, a doctor at the end of it, who's trying his very best and who's seeing in a day about 10 deaths, sometimes is breaking down inside and is also wanting to make a logical attempt. And that is where there is going to be a difference between statistical significance and clinical significance. Yes. Where the doctor says, I've seen some clinical improvement, let's try. And I think this is where the clinician needs to be given the merit. We cannot just tell him statistics and tell him, look, this is statistic, now don't touch it. The clinician needs to be given the merit for this. On the other hand, coming to the other aspect of looking at your other aspect of the question was?
That the fact that there has been a paucity of oxygen, and that paucity has been generated to quite some extent by just hoarding in black market. How can that...
Here again, I would like to add that it's a very perplexing scenario. Which if you look at the spectrum of people that are coming in, and I'm telling last night till 1:30 I was only doing this for some patients who were desperately reaching out to me to see how can I help them. Now I'll just give you a real-time scenario. The patient who had this problem was a patient who's a young gentleman whose oxygen saturation suddenly started to dip by the 5th or 6th day. Now by this time, they've actually, if you see the story, the symptom begins on day 1. They wait for 2 days with paracetamol. By day 3, it's worsening. So now they are going in for the COVID test, and the test has not yet arrived. So it takes 2 more days. By the 3rd day, the PCR test comes negative, but he's heading towards breathlessness. And by this time, you see, he's panicking because they're saying that we'll not get a bed because PCR is negative. But then they're trying to panic and create a bed. And by that time, beds are not available and his oxygen saturation is now at 90. And 4 hours later, they say it's dipping towards 80. and they don't have oxygen. Now that's the kind of a spectrum of a scenario in a young gentleman. Earlier in wave 1, we had some kind of a direction to say 60 and above, worry, comorbidity, arrive, get more prepared. But right now, it doesn't seem to be looking at any of these parameters. The virus seems to be attacking the lung of anybody and everybody. So at that juncture, it becomes very, very difficult to navigate and predict something with certainty. And that is where the medical fraternity is grappling with, because we are not able to predict and tell aapko. For example, if I know that among the two people, can I predict and say who among these two are going to go to a ventilator? No, I'm not able to. So while blood parameters and others have been indicative, they have not been directive. No guidelines have been able to triage people based on either blood test or based on their age or other parameters, except for CT scan. Now, CT scan is again a scarce resource in this country and not easy to get into directly if you're talking about peripheries and others. But definitely CT scan is one such unit that is being used to triage. So if you have a score of above 15 and severe, they're saying it's better you get admitted because your likelihood to go and reach the ventilator is higher. These are the kind of triaging tools that have to be used up. And I must tell you that DRDO has taken a very, very major step to help HCG academics and our team of ANC develop a very beautiful Atman artificial intelligence system, which can, using digital chest x-rays, be able to predict and diagnose COVID to a certainty of more than 80%. And I think that's a very big step for us to contribute to villages and towns in the country. So we are working on triaging modules like this.
I think you're doing a brilliant job, Doctor. And I'll again wish you all the good health so that you are able to help hundreds and thousands who are actually in need of your help at this point of time to fight the coronavirus 19.